Be interesting to see if people actually roll in today or not. I know. Today would be the day it would bother me. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So today I'm gonna spend like the first half or so of class showing you what a lot of these assessments we've been talking about actually look like. We have like some show and tell. And then the second half of class, y'all are gonna actually fill out some questionnaires. I'm not gonna collect these, so you can fill them out honestly if you'd like. It's really just for you to get used to it. And you will also pair up with a classmate and do an intake interview with them, or like a very, very brief intake interview with them. One thing I just wanted to show you all that I finally got all updated today is if you go to our course and you go to recordings of lectures, there is a playlist on YouTube of all of the lectures so far this semester. So not a ton, but I will add to it throughout the semester. If you're ever interested, there's one from 2 years ago too, if you want to see how different I am. Seeing the picture of my cat reminded me of a funny story to tell you all. Took our cat to the vet for the first time, just establishing appointment yesterday. Giza is not a she. That was like, that's a penis. Oh, okay, because they're internal for the cat. So yeah, we have 2 boys now. We have bros. It's gonna be fun. It was just funny. And then since I've been telling people that, so many people have been like, oh, me too. So apparently sexing cats is a little more difficult than you think it is. So, but alrighty. I'm gonna start by talking about interviews, since that's where we started when we were talking about things. And show you all, this is out of date now, and I'll try to hold them up here too. So when I was in graduate school, we gave every single person who came to our training clinic this, which is the structured clinical interview, and we were doing it for the DSM-4. Since that is, just a sec, I think what I want to do is pin myself. Yeah, there we go. Since that was the DSM version at that point in time. It was actually the DSM-4 TR, which stands for text revision. I don't know why they don't just like call it something else, but they like make that one 5, but they do this like we're on the DSM-5 TR right now. Just put it out. But anyway, so this was a very structured clinical interview, and you typically started with the screening module. And for the screening module, you say, I'm going to ask you some more specific questions about problems you may have had. We'll go into more detail about them later. And then, has there been any time in your life when you've had 5 or more drinks, beer, wine, or liquor on any one occasion? As you could imagine, a lot of college students popped positive on that one, right? But then you go through a later module and you realize like they don't actually have a substance use disorder, right? They're just college drinking. We jokingly called it college drinking, not otherwise specified, right? Because like it's not diagnosable, but maybe if they weren't in college, it might be, right? Depending. So you ask about things like, have you ever used street drugs? And for each one, and again, I'll try to like show this up here. For each one, you either circle yes or no. And then that indicates to you, do you go on and give that whole module later? The screener lets you skip a bunch of stuff if they answer no to that first question. That's nice. You ask things like, is there anything that you've been afraid to do or feel uncomfortable doing in front of other people? Like speaking, eating, or writing. So you're screening for social anxiety there. Have you ever been bothered by thoughts that didn't make sense and kept coming back to you even when you try not to have them? That could sound like psychosis, but that's actually the screener for obsessions from obsessive compulsive disorder. And then follow up, was there ever anything you had to do over and over again and couldn't resist doing, like washing your hands again and again, counting up to a certain number, or checking something several times to make sure that you've done it right? Again, really programming for OCD. There are screeners for eating as well. So have you ever had a time when you weighed much less than other people thought you ought to weigh? If they respond yes, that's where you do the full module for anorexia, for example. And then you give every single person who comes to see you the one about mood disorders, simply because those are the most common disorders that we see in people. Somewhere around 12 to 15% of the population will experience a mood disorder at some point in their life. And depending on the life stage, as we saw with the graph we looked at, it can be much higher for certain genders. So now I'm going to ask you some more questions about your mood. In the last month, has there been a period of time when you were feeling depressed or down most of the day, nearly every day? And then you have them elaborate. What was that like? How long does it last? Did it last as long as 2 weeks? And the reason you're doing this is basically, and again, sorry, this is backwards up there, but it drives me crazy when I'm not mirrored. But basically, you have your questions here, and right next to it are word for word the criteria for the disorder from the DSM. So they've taken the criteria from that diagnostic and statistical manual and just made it a question. And so those probing questions essentially let you actually assess whether they have that symptom or not. So like the criteria is they have to have felt depressed or down for at least 2 weeks. And so that's what you ask. Here there is a 1, 2, and a 3. We never marked 2. It was either 3 was yes, 1 was no. If it was unclear, 2 is supposed to be sort of like maybe, then we would probe more until we got a clear yes or no, basically. And then you do that with all the symptoms of depression. How were you sleeping? And then if they're not clear, you can probe. Did you have trouble falling asleep, waking frequently, trouble staying asleep, waking too early, or sleeping too much? What was your energy like? Were you tired all the time, nearly every day? The one that got me, that was really interesting. So the DSM criteria is feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt. The question just is, how did you feel about yourself? And I would say about half of people who I saw who had depression unprompted, all I asked was, how did you feel about yourself? Said worthless. Like, it's really heartbreaking to hear people say that, right? So the people who write this criteria know what they're talking about, right? You also go through and you do something, you screen out other things. You like ask, did this happen right before you were physically ill or right after? Make sure it's not just related to mono or something like that, because the physical symptoms of depression can look like some other things. You ask about like substance use to make sure you can rule that out as well. And then once you've worked your way through that, then you ask about manic episodes. In the past month, has there been a period of time when you were feeling so good, high, excited, or hyper that other people were not, that thought you were not your normal self, or you were so hyper that you got into trouble? That other people thought you were not your normal self is really important, because for manic episodes, you have to be like observable by others. And so again, you go through all those, and then the beautiful thing is you're like, oh, okay, so they said no on the screener for this, so I get to skip it. They said no on the screener for this, so I get to skip it, right? When you get to some of them, it's trickier. So for example, if they endorse using substances, we had a whole cheat sheet of all the different kinds of substances that I'm sure is now out of date, right? Because there's always new drugs. But just to ask about, you know, and you could even like hand this to them, which of these have you been using, that type of thing. Because, you know, you've got your cannabis, right? You've got your stimulants, but stimulants, there's things on here you might not think about. Most diet pills have stimulants in them. This is why there was one when I was in grad school that used to advertise on TV all the time. That was like, more weight loss, faster weight loss, energy to burn. It was because it has stimulants in it. It's like taking that. Things along those lines. These I think this is probably a little trickier now to assess, right? Because we all know that alcohol use is fairly normalized, but like with cannabis being legal in a lot of states, is that normalized? We actually had an argument with one of our professors. He didn't think you could have a cannabis use disorder. We're like, it's literally in the DSM, right? Like, it's probably harder to get to than some of the other things, but you can, right? When it interferes with your life. And so you go through this whole thing. And the beautiful thing is, for each disorder, if they meet the criteria, boom, you know that they have that disorder, you diagnose them. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity,
He didn't say it this way, but I'm pretty sure he was a heavy user and was sort of in denial. But his argument was it doesn't have the same like deleterious effect as some other things. I've even had like a university official say this to me in the past, like, they kind of don't mind pot because they just sit in their dorm room and order pizza, right? They're not bugging anybody, but it can interfere with your life, right? You can end up not going to class or to work. And driving while under the influence of cannabis could be similar to drunk driving. And there were lots of accidents caused by that. I'm currently working on updating slides for a new edition of the book I use for psychopathology. I work with the company who runs the book. And one of the things, I think it's like 11,000 deaths a year are caused by, or maybe just accidents a year are caused by people who are driving while high on cannabis in particular. So it slows down your reflexes just like drinking and driving does. But yeah, good question. We are all just kind of like side-eyeing. Sometimes grad school is just one big side-eye. But that's fun. You're gonna get to see what a more like informal, unstructured intake is like later in the class. So I'll hold off on that and start walking you through some of these other ones. So as I mentioned previously, technically I'm supposed to like guard the Rorschach, but it's all on Wikipedia, so like whatever. But this is what the actual Rorschach inkblot set looks like. Just comes in a little box. And it's just the blots. But all that's 10 cards, I believe 12 years ago. Yeah, I bought these in like 2012. This cost the school like $75. It's a little absurd. Right? And so again, you just hold it up and you say, what might this be? And then you have to follow up. So in order, at least under the Exner system I was trained in order to score it, you need at least 14 responses. So if they just give you one to the first card, you say something like, oh, well, people often see more than one thing. What else might this be? And then they get really into it. The Rorschach is hard to give only because you have to document every single thing they say, every single thing they do. So if you hand them the card and they go, huh, it's actually like little symbols where you like indicate where they rotated it. You also have to indicate which part of the blot you're using. This is actually, you go through the blots twice. The first time is just, what might this be? The second time is like, help me understand where you're seeing it. And so you have to indicate like what area of the blot, if they're using the negative space instead of the positive space, things along those lines. And as you saw from my dress the other day, some of these have red on them as well. Yes, that's like purposely to try to elicit, are they going to say something about blood, right? This is the one that like everybody thinks is a bat, which it looks like a bat to me, so that makes sense, right? This one is always interesting to me because when we were learning about, well, maybe it was this one, they're kind of similar in this, but when we were learning about the Rorschach, my second semester of graduate school, our professor was having us like describe them like brave people. And one of them, I think it was this one, my friend said, it looks like a bearskin rug or something, it looks fuzzy. And texture is actually something like, if they're talking about texture, that's something you score. And yes, that's supposed to look phallic at the top. It's based on Freudian theory, right? So yeah, it's, will you say that looks like a penis or not? Again, interesting to think about. Mix up with a little. And then you get to the end and you have these fun full color ones. So then you see like, do they say different things or use different things if there's color? Yes, I think I mentioned this the other day. I do have a favorite Rorschach blot, and that's this one. I really like, I think these little crabby things up here can look like fireworks. Kind of cool. So that's all the material that the company who still sells it gives to you. And you can imagine how you could go a whole bunch of different directions with interpretation if this is all you have, right? What I have is this, which is the interpretive guide for the Exner system. And along with that comes this. So these are the scoring sheets for one Rorschach. You would complete this for each Rorschach that you do. And then each of the things on that sheet has information in this book, kind of explaining it to you. I thought the thing that was most helpful about this workbook is it has, in the back, it has diagrams showing you the different parts and how they're labeled. So like, for example, if they're talking about just sort of like the nose of the wolf here, that is part DD24. And then there's a list where you can go and say, okay, they use DD24. What are some common things people say for that section? What are some uncommon things people say? So for example, fairly common is human. Not so common is nipple, right? So things along that, again, you got everything. There are also ones for if you use the whole blot and what people see there. So all uncommon ones for these are like airplane or cross-section of a brain. More common ones would be like face or face of a wolf, things along those lines. And it breaks it down in that way for each and every one of the blots. So again, when the blots get more complicated, right, so does the interpretation. Yeah.
So how do you interpret it if they say something that's not on the list, or is that?
Good question. You just, that becomes an unusual, basically. That becomes this is one that's not given that often. And it happens for sure. People have interesting minds. I think I told you I've given 2 Rorschachs ever. In one case, I thought it was really helpful, actually. It was a woman who was inpatient hospitalized, and she just wasn't getting better. And she was getting to the end of what her insurance would cover. And if you don't know, inpatient hospitalization can be like thousands of dollars a day if your insurance isn't covering it. So they were like, can you assess her and see what we're missing, basically. And what the Rorschach brought up was that she had some ambivalence about getting better. So in addition to taking the Rorschach workshop, I had just taken a workshop on therapeutic assessment, where you use the results from someone's assessment as like part of therapy. And so I did this. You give them the results and you're like, I wonder, like, how does that sound to you? Is that something that makes sense? And she said, yeah, actually, my husband and I haven't been getting along. And so I am afraid to go home. And so that was a new thing that her doctor could address, and much easier than like sort of stabbing in the dark, right? So I thought that was great. Was it worth the 7 hours it took to administer for it? Probably not, but in that particular case, maybe it was, right? Incomplete sentences blank, just what it says, literally. Some of the stems on here, I like, men, a mother, I can't, and the only instructions are complete these sentences to express your real feelings, try to do every one, be sure to make a complete sentence. So again, that was the one I gave most common. TAT, So this one does come with a little guide, so thick, so big, but at least there's something in there. And then again with the TAT, it's kind of random because you get to decide which subsets you give. So just a couple examples. There are some like very existential looking. I'll probably better because you see a big, very existential looking ones, right? You're trying to pull some of this stuff. There are some ones that don't even have people in them. Like here's sort of a potentially comforting snow scene or potentially spooky snow scene, right? Depending on how you interpret it. And then some of them are like the one we looked at the other day, right? Where there's a couple people in there and it's very ambiguous, right? This could be his mother, his grandmother. Maybe he just had to tell her something horrible, or she just told him she's gonna die, right? All kinds of ways you can interpret it. Again, I've never actually given a TAT, I've just studied it. Alrighty, now we'll get into our personality inventories. So I am very fortunate in that Dr. Donald Wolfgang, who had my position as the clinical person here for years and years, has an extensive archive of older pests and left them. And so I benefit from this. So this is a very original MMPI. I kind of love this. This was from this is like they renewed the copyright in the 70s, but this is the original from 1943. And what I thought was really cool about this is this one is designed so you would put a bubble sheet behind it, and then as you flip through, the pages get one column smaller each time, so they would line up with the bubble line that you were filling out. As anyone who's ever messed up which bubble is which on a standardized test, I had to like erase a lot and hope that the bubbles turn out okay. That's kind of brilliant in its own way. So yeah, some of the older questions on here, I find it hard to keep my mind or test on a job. Things that have happened with my family have frightened me. I often think I wish I was a child again. Policemen are usually honest. That one would be interesting in today's context. People can pretty easily change me, even though I thought I made my mind up. Things along those lines. This is the more traditional way that it's given, and again, this is an original MMPI. I realize the only thing I don't have is a 2. But this is what the original MMPI look. It really does look like a standardized test booklet, like you would do in school. There would have been a separate bubble sheet so that you could reuse this packet with different people. And again, 566 questions. The first item, as I mentioned, was I like mechanic magazines. Yeah, it's a little random. All right, so the MMPI 3. Here now we've made the test booklet a little firmer, not so floopy. So again, hopefully it'll last longer. And again, just very clear. I love to go dancing. I'm a very sociable person. I feel worthless. We all know that what that pulls from, having just talked about the skid, right? I panic easily. I believe I'm being followed. I've made a plan for killing myself. Again, one of those ones you would look at right away. I'm never happier than when alone. I'm sure I'm being talked about. I'm easily startled. I often check things over and over. I gossip a little at times. That's probably on that L scale, the fake good scale, right? Because we all kind of gossip a little at times, right? And so again, now instead of 566 items, it is 355. So much shorter, much quicker to fill out. And I didn't realize I had 2 of these, so I brought both of them in. But the beautiful thing that I mentioned that I really, really like about the MMPI 3 is you don't have to buy a separate book for interpretation. It comes with it. They've standardized it. This is your manual for administration, scoring, and interpretation. And so for each scale, there is a chart. So for example, here is the one for, let me find the L we were just talking about. Finding all the F ones. There we go. So like here is the table for how you interpret the L scale. And so it tells you, okay, if the person scores over 80, the protocol may be invalid. Underreporting is indicated by the test taker presenting themselves in an extremely positive light and denying many minor faults and shortcomings that most people will acknowledge. And the 70 to 79 is possible underreporting. 65 to 69 is possible underreporting, but only if the test taker's presenting themselves in a very positive light. And then under 65, there's no evidence of underreporting, it's fine. And you have that for each of the scales. So for example, if we look at those big 3 scales I was talking about, and we look at the one for thought dysfunction. So if they score between 65 and 79, it indicates significant thought dysfunction. Over 80, serious thought dysfunction. Diagnostic considerations, evaluate for disorders associated with thought dysfunction like schizophrenia. May require inpatient treatment. Need for antipsychotic medication should be evaluated. And then let's say we look at the RCD, we talked a lot about that. It's one where they just pulled all the items that measured demoralization out and made a clean scale. Some of these have interpretations if they're low. So if a person scores less than 39, they report a higher than average level of morale and life satisfaction. It's not a bad thing. It's just a cool correlate we have, right? If they're between 39 and 65, there's no interpretation. If it's 65 to 73, they feel sad and unhappy, dissatisfied with their current life circumstances. If it's over 74, they experience significant demoralization, they feel overwhelmed, they're extremely unhappy, sad, and dissatisfied with their own life. And that gives you correlates. The cool thing with the correlates is when we were doing research, like we were participating as therapists in the research. So we wouldn't get our MMPI scores back typically until after 3 sessions with the client, so that it didn't sway us one way or the other. And then before we got the MMPI, we'd fill out a big page of statements about how they described our clients. And these correlates are those statements. So we're part of this data set, basically. But there are things like the therapist says this person has low self-esteem, experiences sadness and despair, is at risk for suicidal ideation. So diagnostic considerations evaluate for depression-related disorder. Treatment considerations evaluate for risk for self-harm, and focus on relief of demoralization as a target. Give you some other examples here. Just flip to the one about aggression. If they're between 65 and 85, they're engaging in physically aggressive, violent behavior and losing control. If they're above 86, they're being basically, they enjoy doing that, which is something else altogether, right? We're talking maybe antisocial personality disorder. So evaluate for those related disorders. Empirical correlates have a history of violent behavior towards others, is abuse. And again, it has that for every single one. And then it has some sample reports with the little lines that we've looked at before. And it does that for every one of them, which is really nice. So that is lovely. And I really like the MMPI 2 and the MMPI, or 2RF and the 3, because they both pay with things. The PAI, and again, both the MMPI and the PAI can now be given on the computer. But the PAI gonna look very similar in terms of like, here's a list. You would have maybe a separate bubble sheet. This one I think you could circle on. But this one is 344 items. The first item is my friends are available if I need them. Some other examples, I have no trouble falling asleep. I'm a loner. My behavior is pretty wild at times. People say I'm a perfectionist. People generally hide their real motives. Maybe some paranoia. I'm a reckless person. And so again, this gives you some similar scales to the MMPI. Again, I'm an MMPI loyalist because that was I was mostly trained in. I find the MMPI more helpful than the PAI. But if this is what you have available to you, you get a lot of good information from it. All right, last one I'm going to show y'all before you get to go in and do some of this yourself is the 16PF. So this is the one that's based on Patel's work. And as I mentioned, this has some changing answers which the others don't. The others you all either answer true, false, or like mostly true, very true. So for example, I would rather stop in the street to watch an artist painting than listen to some people have a quarrel. True, uncertain, or false? When talking, I like A, to say things just as they occur to me. C, to get my thoughts well organized first, or B, in between. So there's a lot of uncertain or in betweens on this one. And then this is the scoring sheet where you would actually record the scores. And again, what I like about the PF is that it's both directions, right? It's fully recognizing these are traits that you can go either way on. And it's not only looking at sort of like pathological things, kind of like the MMPI and the PAI do. Alrighty, so I'm gonna pass everything out, and I would say probably do the intake first. So pair up with somebody and you can each interview each other. But then I'm also gonna bring around the self-report questionnaires. For the self-report questionnaires, I have the Big Five inventory, which is one of the major ways we measure the Big Five personality traits. It has a scoring on it. And then I found screeners for borderline personality disorder and psychopathy. Those don't have scoring on them, but basically like the more things you endorse, the higher your score, the more likely you are to have it. So I'll bring around the intake form, and then I'll bring around the questionnaires. Take one and pass it back, and then pair up with somebody. I'm not sure if we have an even or odd number of people here today. We might need to do it. And kind of like the skid, if there's like questions you don't think it helps to follow up with for somebody, then you can skip them. It's like put these chairs where it's nearly impossible for me to get to y'all. I'll get there. Yeah, let me just give you 4 here. Perfect. There you go. And then I'll come back with the other ones. And I recognize that it can be hard to do the like mock intake interview with everybody asking the same questions at the same time. So if you want to go outside or find other places in the building to do it, you can do that. This is the last thing we're doing today. So if you want to come check in with me when you're done, you can, but otherwise you can just head out after you're done with this. And then these are the other questionnaires. Yeah, there's no like assignment with it, it's just. I didn't know that. And then folks on Zoom, let me share your screen real quick here. So if you go to Blackboard and you go to discussion assignments, then you can find these questionnaires there if you'd like to complete them yourselves. I'm going to turn off the Zoom just because it's not going to do any good at this point in time. And I'll hopefully see y'all Monday.